Oh guys, I've made a very big mistake. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the stable and Happy New Year, a time of self-reflection and wondering why my clothes doesn't fit the same. Before we get started, I just want to talk about how big of a year 2023 was for this channel. We kickstarted the year by opening up the doors to the stable, which allowed us to have full creativity for this build. We started off by shaving the shock towers and installing the main components for the Mustang 2 suspension. Then somewhere along the middle of the year, we acquired a customer project which taught us valuable lessons in running a business and not undercharging. After that, we jumped right back into the Mustang by narrowing and installing that Explorer differential, which that leads us closer to the present, where we now have the engine installed and relocated for improved center of gravity. The next step for this build would be to build a crossmember for the transmission, because it's only being held up by a jack stand right now. We're going to be building the transmission crossmember out of these scraps right here, which leads us to our last and final point. We have a big announcement to make for the Mustang. These pieces were from the scrap pile at the metal supply store. Part of the engine mounts was also from the scrap pile from the metal supply store. The differential that we installed was also scrap from a crashed Explorer. The engine was also scrapped from another Explorer. The T5 transmission was a scrap pile of pieces that we have to put together. You catching on to that pattern we have going on? We are renaming this car ScrapStang, or scraps for short. I can't think of a better name for this car, as it was built from scraps, and frankly, it looks like a piece of scrap metal. With that out of the way, thank you guys for your support in 2023. Here's to an awesome 2024. Let's get to work. So the components that we are going to use in order to build this crossmember are these scrap pieces, which these two are about a 1/4 inch steel plate here that I'm going to cut to size. For the main part of the crossmember, we have this very rusty tube here. Not too sure what size it was, about 1 1/4. But this is DOM tubing, which according to the guy at the front desk and the quick Google search I did, this should be stronger than regular tube. At first I thought this tube was going to be too small, but with this being DOM tubing and the T5 transmission only weighing about 75 pounds, this should be plenty strong enough for what we're doing. Last but not least, we have a transmission mount right here. Shout out to my boy Juan for hooking it up with a discount on this. This is actually a C4 automatic transmission mount for the 6065 Mustangs, but coincidentally, the bolt pattern for the C4 and the T5 are the same. All right, so for the rough idea, we have our cross tube, which would be the rusty pipe. Then we will turn this 1/4 inch plate into some kind of brace, which in turn will look something like this. In theory, these should just slide into the frame rail. This is where it's going to get a little tricky. We have to figure out where and how we want to mount this transmission mount to the crossmember. So the way that I'm thinking it is going to work is we might have to build another brace in order for these bolts to go through, and that in turn will hold the transmission up. You see, it sounds easy to build, but if there's one thing we've learned here is that if you think it's going to be easy, odds are it's probably not. Since we are going to be under the car quite a bit for this project, we're gonna try to raise it as high as we can. Really as high as this jack will allow us. But thanks to the Catman, we should be having a new jack soon. Okay, let's take these. I could have very well lost my finger there. Let's take these fake wheels out. So I still want the rear end to sit on its own weight. Looks pretty good to me. So just to protect my life here, in case one of these jacks holding the axle up goes out, I have this one in the middle that's almost a 1/4 inch from touching. If any of these were to go out, then it'll touch that. If it were to fall, I should have enough time to get out. Let's take a look. All right, So taking a look at the underside of the car, there's a couple things we need to do before we can put this plan in motion. We're going to grab a couple angles from a couple different places. So the transmission housing at the moment is reading at 5 degrees, and the axle or the pinion angle is right at 4 degrees, which is, I think, exactly where we want it to be. And just to confirm that transmission angle, I'm also gonna measure off of the crank pulley. And the crank pulley is also giving us 5 degrees. Let's just write some of this stuff down so we don't forgetty spaghetti. Okay, so this is our big V8 engine. And then we have the transmission right here. The angle of the engine and the transmission is 5 degrees, and the angle of our pumpkin is right at 4 degrees. The engine is not actually pointed 5 degrees upwards. Since I had to lift the car upwards for me to roll easy under the car, the front end is actually a little bit higher than the rear end, causing that extra degree. So if the car was actually sitting on the ground, that 5-degree engine angle would actually look more like 3 or 2 engine degree angle. But the differences within the angles would stay the same. So we're sitting at about a 1 degree difference from the engine angle to the differential pinion angle. Usually in terms of pinion angle, you would want both of these degrees to be the same. But when the engine is under hard acceleration, this pinion angle is bound to twist upwards a degree or 2. This engine doesn't make a lot of power, so we're not going to see very drastic changes. So I think I want to keep it at 4 degrees. There's a lot of variables that go into doing this, ride height being one of them. So if we were to adjust those QA1 coilovers upwards or downwards, it would change our pinion angle. But if we make a mistake and our pinion angle is off, we can fix it. But coincidentally, the engine and the differential angle are exactly where we want them to be. If we were to run into any issues where our pinion angle might have some differences and it's not where we want it to be, we can also shim this mount or the mount that we're making in order to make it work anyway. All right, so let's get familiar with what we have going on here. We have one frame rail here, another frame rail here, and this is our T5 transmission. With our transmission mount installed, it now gives us a good idea of where we have to put the rusty dusty tube in between the frame rails. And I believe it is going to sit somewhere right here. I can't fit it exactly right because it's too long. I have to cut it to size. First things first, let's grab a measurement in between the frame rails. We are sitting right around 27 inches. Also, huge shout out to the Catman for this creeper, because without it, we'd be rolling around under the car on our bare backs, and that's just not fun. So once again, we need to cut this tube to about 27 inches. But before we do that, we also need to account for the thickness of the plates. So we have a 1/4 inch plus a 1/4 inch, that's a 1/2 inch. So 27 inches minus 1/2 inch equals 26.5 inches. So that's what our cross tube actually has to be. I usually use this vise to cut all of my materials, but I have to stop doing that because it is sitting right next to all of these flammable liquids and chemicals, which I put a blanket over it, but I don't want to risk anything anymore. And it would also just make a huge mess with grinding dust all over the place, all over my tools. So that's not good. Introducing the new grinding headquarters. I have to permanently mount this with some bolts onto this fixture, but for now, since we're in a hurry, we'll just use some clamps. Once again, shout out Mr. Catman for these clamps. If you guys don't know who the Catman is yet, get to know. So 26.5 inches will leave us somewhere about here. So I know it's hard to see, but we have our 26.5 inch mark right here. And what I'm going to do to make my life a little bit easier is use a piece of tape to keep that line straight. With our measurements set, we now have a really good really good line right here to just zip, chop it off. Since it's already on the vise, I'm gonna go ahead and clean it up with a flapper disc because I'm getting tired of it leaving all this rusty residue on me. All right, so now we got a clean tube rather than a dusty tube, a rusty, crusty tube. This is going to give us a pretty good idea of where we have to sit, which is going to be somewhere right here. Maybe. I guess the first thing I should do is probably clean off these nasty frame rails. I know we joked about it being cold, last video being 50 degrees, but this morning was 33 degrees and it physically hurts to be here. I want this pipe to sit as close to the transmission mount as I can get it. So let's also get a couple measurements. The bottom of the frame rails measure in at about 2.5 inches, and the sides, or the height of the frame rail, measures in just at about 2 3/4. The passenger side frame rail is a bit beat up, being 3 inches right here and 2.5 inches right here, but you can see all the dents and damage it's gone through in its life. So once again, the measurement for these brackets on the sides is 2 3/4 inch, and on the bottom they were 2 1/2. I think I'm going to make the vertical brackets first before I make these bottom ones, just in case there's any discrepancies, so we can more accurately measure these bottom plates. Okay, so once again, our measurement from this edge to this line is 2 3/4 inch, and then I'm making the width of this a total of 3 inches. That should give us enough space to run a couple bolts on either side of this tube. I did want to make it a little longer, maybe about 4 inches, but if I were to run frame rail connectors later on, these would probably get in the way. Would you look at that? We still have some extra clamps to play with. This cut came out pretty straight for being an angle grinder. Now we have to cut our 3-inch pieces. Yeah, honestly, for being angle grinder cuts, these look pretty even. So the tube is going to get one of these tabs welded on in the end like this on either side. I have the plates welded onto the frame rail at the moment, so that in turn will act like if the tube was welded onto it, so I could see if I need to do any more trimming. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what we want. We wanted a bit of a snug fit. Pretty damn snazzy right there. So this is just being held up by friction at the moment, but this gives us a pretty good idea of what it'll look like in the end. So I've made some adjustments and final measurements. As you can see, the crossmember is sitting right at 0 degrees. Our pipe is sitting at the lower center part of the plates. We have about 1/2 inch of clearance between the transmission mount and the crossmember. I wish I was ready to start tacking these pieces, but I'm not. I need to clean up the metal a bit as well as bevel it. But I'm going to make some marks so I know where this plate sat. It was a big pain. It's very hard to film under here. It's hard alone to just work under here. But this creeper is making it pretty fun. Oh, when you hit yourself and it's so cold, it just hurts that much more. Oh, rip my eardrums. All right, let's clean up this metal, put some bevels in it. We got some decent bevels going on here. That'll definitely help us get a more solid weld. Of course I dropped the pipe on top of the Sharpie that I was using to make all of our measurements. This sucks so bad doing it in the cold. Oh my god, that could have killed me. We've also cracked our angle finder. How the hell that even happened? Ow! Oh man, my wrist is definitely not a fun one. Not liking any part of this. 0 degrees. Oh my god. As much of a pain as this is, we are making progress, so let's get some tacks on there. All right, let's get everything we need. Gloves, cutters. How in the hell am I supposed to fit under here with the welding helmet? I just want to get out of the underside of this car already. Ow! Some landed on my neck. Ow. This is so not cool. Let's get the hell out of here and finish these welds outside of the car. Maybe I should have added a little bit of extra wiggle room to get this thing out. If I hit it with the hammer, we might break the tacks that we spent so long. No need to fear. All right, so update on the pipe. I broke it on purpose though. I wasn't liking the clearance that we had. It was too snug of a fit, which in some cases is really good, but in this case, it's gonna make it really hard if we have to hammer this cross member into the transmission every single time. So I think I'm gonna take just a bit off of here. Also, huge shout out to Ryan Macy for keeping us warm with this episode's coffee. So once again, I'm gonna shave maybe a 1/16 of an inch off of here, as well as take off some of these boogers that are on here. We're back again. Totally my fault. But why do something once when we can do it twice? I have so much foreign objects in my eye. I am liking it. It has just enough clearance. Ow! This sucks so damn bad. Just kidding, guys. This is awesome. Don't you see how much fun I'm having? Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Oh no, I forgot to turn the gas on. Good thing it melted enough to hold it in place there. Very much jinxed myself there. Very much. Will it come out as easy? Yeah, definitely comes out easier. No need for the mallet anymore. All right, so we're about halfway there. This is what the cross member in turn is going to look like. Got 3 tacks holding that one, 1 tack holding this one. Now let's just run some full beads. The welds were actually not that bad. Let's see if we could get a slightly better one on the other side. Those are definitely a bit better. Let's do the other side. Yeah, second side came out a little bit better with the ends welded on. Hopefully we didn't get any warpage. So let's see what the test fit looks like. This thing is still kind of hot, so I don't really want to touch it too much. Ah! Yeah, it's definitely still hot. I like it. It's snug enough where it'll hold itself in place, but not too snug where it's a pain to install. If I had a tube bender, I could probably make a cool shape here in order to have some exhaust clearance, but since I don't, this is what we got. So the next step would be to figure out how we're going to attach this cross member to that transmission mount. Before we move on to that next step, I think I want to make the bolt holes in order to solid mount this thing before we make that bracket. One trip to the hardware store later and we got some 3/8 bolts. I like using flange bolts most of the time. They are a little more pricey and the hardware store only had 4 of these. So it's all we're gonna use. Since we only have 4 of these, I think I'm only gonna run a diagonal pattern, like having one right here and one up here. Let's make some holes. I'm gonna drill a pilot hole first. Give it a little bit of spritz because drill bits are expensive. Next size. All right, there is our 2 holes. I was a little worried on how close this hole was to these welds, but it's plenty of room for this nut to spin freely. Next side. How are we going to duplicate these inner plates to the outer plates? Well, I have both plates sandwiched on the vise, so I'm just going to use the pre-drilled holes as a template to just drill straight through there. There's 1. There's 2. Good enough for me. What the guys, I swear this thing landed like this. What are the odds? Heads or tails? Nothing. From the underside, we're gonna go ahead and mark center of our holes here. All right, so some things to note here that I did not account for are this hole might be too high for me to properly get the drill in line without the drill hitting on the bottom of the floor here. Then this bottom hole is a little too close to the end of the frame rail right here, being that it's all bent up. So if I had to do it again, I would probably lift this hole a little bit higher. But it is what it is and we're gonna roll with it. Nothing like metal shavings all over you. I'm so tired. 1 coffee and 1 Red Bull in. We're about 60% there. Stupid fuel line is in the way. Screw it. I'm just gonna run it all the way through. I don't care anymore. I've made a mistake. Made a big mistake. Oh guys, I've made a very big mistake. You see, the holes on this side of the frame rail were already determined by the plate that we made, but the angle of the drill was most likely not straight. So these holes turned out to be not exactly the same as these. That's why I had to widen it a little bit, which makes it a little bit ghetto, but this whole car looks ghetto, so don't really care. I'm bleeding. but I don't know from where. All right, ladies and gents, the cross member is now bolted in. I had to do it off camera because if you guys could hear what I was saying, YouTube would surely demonetize this video. I wanted the bolt heads to be on this side, but it wouldn't go in because of this hump on the floor. Either way, that's what it looks like. It's definitely not pretty, but if there's one thing I don't, is care. So now we can focus on how we're going to attach this thing to that thing. What I'm thinking will be the easiest solution is to just make a 90-degree tab here and then add some reinforcements as we need it. Guys, this has for sure been the hardest video to make. So I'd very much appreciate it if you guys drop a like. So for the bracket that's going to attach to this motor mount, I'm going to make the plate so I can have a better idea of how we're going to connect it. These studs are actually 1/2-inch studs. I thought they were 3/8. So we drilled it with 1/2-inch drill bits and broke 2 of them. So the stepper bit saved the day, but that's how it's going to sit. So the edge of the contacting surface is right up against the edge of the metal plate, and then this side is what's going to go towards the cross member. Okay, so this is the plate that we are going to use for the transmission mount. This is how it's going to fit. All right, so we've installed the transmission mount with its corresponding mounting plate. I think you guys can start getting the idea of what we're trying to do here. So all that's left to do is to connect this piece to this piece right here, and we should be golden. So the gap that we have to fill is just shy of 1 inch, but I want to try something that I believe will give it some more structural rigidity, but we'll see if it works. Okay, so just a quick rundown of what we did. This width right here between these 2 points is 4.5 inches, which is what our transmission mount plate is exactly. But like I said, I wanted to add an extra inch, so we're going to connect, giving us this triangle piece right here that we are going to cut out. So the top of it is 6.5 inches, whereas the bottom of it will be 4.5 inches, which will weld up directly to that transmission mount plate. All right, now you can more accurately see what we were talking about here. So once again, this top part measures in at 4.5 inches, whereas the bottom part measures in at 6.5 inches, giving us a little bit more meat to weld on. All right, there is our triangle piece in there right now. It's looking pretty damn good. I think we're a couple bevels away from finishing this up, guys. Oh, it's been a long one. All right, guys, let's get this thing welded in. I've already checked the engine angle. It's still good. We're going to hold the plate the best that we can by hand because we don't have a good assortment of magnets. Oh yeah! Let's bring it down and then we'll finish welding it outside. It's gonna come out one piece now. This is the little gremlin that has taken us all day. Let's throw some welds on here so we could finish this up. I just want to lay a fat bead of weld on all these corners, but there is a chance that some of this will warp and it could throw off our measurements, so I have to do it little bits at a time. Yeah, that one looked really good. I think this is going to redeem us for the welds that we did on the motor mounts. Yeah, these are much better. I'm letting it cool for a little bit before I continue. I do want to run a fat bead on there. I'm so tempted, but I also don't want to mess this up. So let's keep going. All this pain and suffering and the welds not being bad just made up for all of it. Guys, Guys. Oh my goodness. It felt like I was never gonna finish this thing. But there's only one thing left to do. And it's to install it and let the transmission drop and see what happens. See if we still have the angles that we need. Let's find out. Let's get this thing installed. Yeah! It's in! It felt like it was never going to happen. Right at 95. Oh my God, guys. You don't know how happy I am that this is finally done. I've had so much stuff in my eyes, so much stuff in my mouth. I shouldn't say that, but it looks pretty damn good. We didn't end up making the plates on the bottom. I'll end up doing that later, but oh, that's good enough for now. It's definitely good enough for now. Guys, that has to be the hardest video I've ever had to film. We broke a Sharpie, we broke an extension, we cracked our angle finder, and we lost our head a couple times. We're gonna have another round of tattoos on the quarter panel, so if you want your name on the ScrapStang, here's the link before it's too late. On that very, very tired note, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.